This is Joseph Lewin with CADENAS PARTsolutions, here to talk about industrial marketing. Today's conversation is with Eddie Saunders Jr., the mascot of manufacturing and brand champion for Flex Machine Tools. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that isn't touched on a lot in industrial marketing, and that's influencer marketing for manufacturers. Eddie has quite a bit of experience working with influencers specifically for manufacturing, and they've seen a lot of success with influencer marketing at Flex Machine Tools. So without further ado, let's dive into the conversation with Eddie Saunders Jr. Yeah, Eddie, thanks so much for joining me today. To just kick off, so we have a little bit of context, can you tell me a little bit about Flex Machine Tools?
Man, it's such an amazingly loaded question. On surface level, you're going to see a machine tool, solution provider, if you will. But if you're looking underneath the surface and behind the curtains, if you will, really just a growth company, a true disruptor of all things complacent within the manufacturing industry, providing stuff as simple as tapping arms all the way up to large open face vertical machining centers. So disruptor, growth company, all of the above.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us right into the topic of today's conversation, talking about disruption in manufacturing and looking to do marketing things a little different. Is influencer marketing viable for manufacturers?
I want to say this loud and clear for anybody listening. You're probably afraid. You may think I'm crazy, and you're right on both of those, but it absolutely is viable. And you have to think about it. It may be a newer concept, if you will, but people have been utilizing influencers in their marketing strategies for years, whether it's celebrity endorsements or things along those lines. And manufacturing is no exception to that specific rule. There are a variety of content creators that are talking directly to everybody's audiences every single day in ways that brands really can't do directly. So not only is it viable, I think it's very strategic and probably one of the most undervalued marketing and branding opportunities in industrial marketing as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, manufacturing marketing, I would say overall is typically a little bit behind the times, sometimes as much as like 10 years behind the times. In fact, some manufacturers do a great job of keeping up on their website, but I have been to a few websites where I'm like, whoa, I haven't seen a website like this since like 2005. So, manufacturers aren't always known for being up with the times. But when we're talking about influencer marketing, that's really pushing the line for a lot of manufacturers. I mean, I've really only seen a few manufacturers that have even thought of doing anything like that. So maybe just to wet the whistle a little bit, whet people's appetite. What are some examples that you've seen work well in the past for you guys at Flex Machine Tools for influencer marketing?
Yeah, well, I mean, really what puts so much of my faith into that conversation is our own direct experience. We get to be the ultimate case study, if you will. And I know about 2 or so years ago, we actually partnered with a macro influencer within the machining space. And it's really been nothing but amazing for us, in all transparency. Through the efforts of this specific individual and us providing product, we've been able to amass over 1.554 million video views within a 2-year period. And what a lot of things that manufacturers don't think about is in order to achieve the same exact result could cost us thousands upon thousands of dollars, plus not even counting the dollars that you'd have to pay for the individuals producing and making, writing, and distributing that content. So really, it's an amazing way for us to have been able to provide, again, a simple product that is relatively low cost to us because obviously we source it, we make it. And so that was really an entry level expense. And to have that individual being able to make as much content as they would like, it's really incredible. And obviously there's a lot of trust that goes into that because you want to make sure that you're talking about the right influencer, looking at the right audiences. And I know we'll get more into that, but Flex has worked with, a variety of specific influencers on our very different product lines because we also understand that not all influencers are created equal, just like not all advertising is created equal in general. So we've had an amazing experience and we love kind of being on the forefront of that because it is unorthodox and we understand that. But you show me another way that you can get over 1.5 million video content views for under thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and you'll have my attention. But until then, I would argue that every person that says this isn't a viable strategy is missing a major mark and opportunity to brand yourself and tell your story in ways that you probably don't even know how to, and to audience members that you're clearly not talking to in the first place.
Yeah, just to kind of build on what you're saying there, it's not just millions and millions of views that you pay for on TV or, some other channel that's going to be a lot more broad. You're talking about over 1 million views that are very targeted to your audience. I mean, the people who are watching this are very interested in machining and machine tools, or they wouldn't be paying attention to this influencer at all. So, the audience is going to be much more relevant, as and I know we'll talk a little bit more about making sure that the influencer you're working with is actually legit and it's not just random. But
right.
If their audience is legit and, they're getting good engagement, it's not just anybody. It's people who are really users of those tools, and you're starting to build that reputation with the right kind of people.
Of course, man. You got it figured out. You truly, truly do. That's the name of the game, man. It really is.
Yeah. So how did you guys get started in influencer marketing? Because it is a little different for people in the manufacturing world to go that route. So how did you kind of take that leap and decide to go that route?
Yeah, well, like at Flex here, our average age of employee here is probably about the mid-30s, if you will. And this is relevant, I promise. And then our CEO, I think he's in his mid-30s as well. And so to that point, and the reason I bring that up is when we started, looking into this venture, years ago, it made a lot more sense to us because we knew where we wanted to be. We weren't set in our specific ways. We didn't say, hey, this is the way we've always done it, so that's the way that we have to. We really take that idea and we flip it on its head. And we know that if we want to be a true growth company, regardless of the industry that we serve, that we need to do things differently. We need to do things that individuals are afraid of, or literally they run away from these specific things. And so with us, it was something where we knew at the end of the day, you have a channel of an individual, even though that person is a human being, really, when it comes down to it, they generate attention, and you can literally quantify the amount of attention and engagement that these human beings are getting. So it was almost a very targeted and also very relevant and not essentially guaranteed. But when you look at an individual's channel or an influencer's content and you see proven track records of engagement and exposure and frequency, it's almost like you get a quick taste of what type of effectiveness you can have with your specific campaign. Then it all comes on, really the burden is on you now. How can you best equip that influencer to maximize your specific message? And so we did the trade show things and all that other stuff. But then at the end of the day, we thought, man, there's good data behind it. People are afraid to do it. So if anything, it made it more attractive to us. So we just went straight on, and I'm telling you, we haven't looked back since.
Yeah. And one other thing that's kind of interesting about influencer marketing and giving somebody in that position one of your some of your equipment, whatever that would be, is you can get feedback in a way that's much more transparent on your products and on things that you might need to change, or certain training things. Like that person's going to be willing to ask you questions that maybe a customer wouldn't be willing to ask, because they need to understand how a process works or how a piece of equipment works, potentially in a different way. And they could bring up and highlight questions about your product that you wouldn't have really thought needed to be answered, but really do. And then if somebody goes to look up online how to do something specific, that influencer could have created a video about that particular area where other people are going to have questions too. And if that person's bringing questions to you haven't heard, those are great areas for creating that content. And then that video could be a resource for your customer service team or even your sales team when somebody says, well, hey, can it do this? Or how does it work with this? Or do you have a workaround to do, use it for this type of project? Then you have content already ready to go to send out to them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I started, like, no joke. Obviously, I'm in marketing now, and it's something I've definitely kind of made my name for. But prior to this, I spent 12 years in sales. No joke. A lot of my focus was in marketing, but when I started off overseeing all of the Western U.S. sales operation and like channel partnerships, if you will, here in the U.S., I used A-bombs like our specific influencer and our other influencers. I used all of their videos as relevancy because it reminded me of the concept. And this is kind of a funny little joke, but it's so true. Like your mom and dad will tell you something like, don't do something, or they'll give you some type of life lesson and you don't listen. But grandma tells you, or grandpa tells you, or your aunt or your uncle, or your favorite individual, they tell you, and all of a sudden it makes sense, right? So there were so many times where I said, hey, don't listen to me, the sales guy. Here's a human being in his shop who uses our biggest, baddest flex arm tapping unit. And here's what he's doing. Take my word for it. And that in all reality, I think is one of our greatest sales tools because you bring up a good point, and that's transparency, which we also get from individuals. If you think that we're not looking at the comment section when our posts are made, or even when the influencers post, you're crazy, because we absolutely are looking at that. We're trying to see what are the problems that maybe individuals have the gumption to tell an influencer or a brand champion, but maybe not as much to be able to tell us, which it'd only be convenient if they would just tell us everything, right? So we have an extra a pair of eyes, ears, and content creation that allows us to really synergize and overall just create a better understanding for our customers, which in all reality is a huge part of marketing's job anyway.
Yeah. I mean, and that helps with marketing messaging, but also if you have product marketers or marketers that have influence over the development of your products, which hint they should, if they're interfacing with customers and, they're creating the messaging, they're probably going to have some extra insight into product and product development, but that's a great route to kind of facilitate some of that. So what process do you use to define your manufacturing influencer strategy, and how do you go about creating a strategy around your influencer marketing?
Sure. 2 words: reverse engineering, my friend. So it sounds simplistic, but it's also just very difficult sometimes. But what makes it easier is intention. If you reverse engineer with intention and pull out your Simon Sinek, if you will, and say, I'm going to start with why, we have to figure out why are we doing this in the first place? Why are we looking into an influence? And also, what are we trying to accomplish? Who are we trying to speak to? Because in all reality, there are just so many different avenues of influencer, even in manufacturing. You'd be surprised because, even though we have our specific individual who we work with and partner with from a machining and a fabrication standpoint, we also have an amazing partnership with somebody in the welding space as well. And so the first thing that we do is we try to really reverse engineer, what are we trying to say? Who are we trying to talk to? And a lot of the times I'll actually utilize hashtags because I understand very, very much that those are really a set of different language, if you will. It's a piece of communication within social media. And if I'm specifically trying to break through a community such as CNC machining or welding, for another example, I can literally use hashtags based around just hashtag welding, hashtag weld, hashtag welders. There's all types of different things that we can utilize. And not only am I looking at follower count, but I'm very, very much looking at engagement, because I don't care how good a picture you can take or how good a video you can take. If nobody's watching it and nobody's engaging with it, it literally means little to nothing to me. And so those are huge pillars. And one, starting with intention, looking for general engagement, and then above all things, tying it into relevancy and ensuring that you can actually provide them with a tool per se, whether it's tangible, intangible, for them to do what they do best. And that's get their content in front of the people that you're trying to talk to in the first place.
Yeah, that's great. And I think a consideration there that you're kind of bringing up is making sure that you find somebody, and we'll talk about this in a second, but making sure that you find somebody that you're going to be able to make their life easier or better with your tool. Mm-hmm. And if you're making their life better and they're able to do their job easier, it's going to be a natural fit for them to use your product and share about your product in a way that's doesn't feel contrived. Because we've all, I guess I can't say we all, but probably most people that are going to take the time to look at something about influencer marketing have seen an influencer on social media before that is just plugging some product that has absolutely nothing to do with what they normally share about. And it feels canned, and it feels like an ad placement. But what you're talking about is more finding somebody that is in the field, is using this, would use your equipment if they could get their hands on it, and you're providing that equipment to them. Or in the case of, more component manufacturers or somebody like that it would be, providing parts or components or information to somebody that is going to be able to share about that in a normal, natural way. And if you do that, it's easy for them to create content around it, and maybe even create content above and beyond what your original agreement was.
And that happens a lot. You'd be really surprised at the amount of influencers, even ones who are contractually obligated, who will over deliver, because content creators, they love to create content. It's kind of interesting why they're called content creators. You know,
Right.
it's just ironic. They love to do that. And I can say that every single influencer, at least that we have worked with here at Flex, and in my experience, almost every single one has really over delivered. Now, of course, there are circumstances where I'm sure if you're working with like a Kardashian or something of that mess, you know, you've got contracts, this and that, you know, specific quantities and things along those lines. Once you get to a certain level of sponsorship and income, if you will, there are obviously, you know, I's dotted and T's crossed. But I will say, specifically in the manufacturing community, a lot of the content creators are just genuinely happy to do what they love. And you used a big word, not a physically big word, but a high magnitude word, and that was natural. That's the biggest thing. It's so easy nowadays to create content. Anybody can do it, especially podcasts. Over 41% of the Apple podcasts right now have one episode. So people,
Seriously,
straight up,
I didn't know that.
Right? Yeah. So people are out there creating, but it's also having the guts and being natural to it. And I only bring that up is because like, if you give these people the opportunity to do what they love, and it does make sense, and you're checking all these boxes, it's really the most undervalued attention in industrial manufacturing right now. You heard it here first.
Love it. Yeah. So that kind of brings us into the next question, which is how do you go about finding manufacturing influencers?
Sure. I will stick to the theme of intention. You know, it's a little different because with Flex, we're real spoiled. We have multiple product lines, and each of them speak to a similar individual, but also very different human beings. And so we get to be pretty selective where we don't have to use the same individual for all of our product lines. And a lot of it does go back to, I'll use the term reverse engineering again, because we want to create attention, right? We want to get our brand, our product in front of as many human beings as possible. And so we have to make sure we're keeping ourselves honest and we're not just looking for clout. It's easy to clout chase. If you want to work with people who have tons of followers, there are billions of individuals on social media, and there are so many individuals and entities and content creators who have 1 million plus or 7-figure plus followers. Yeah. That's great. But are they the right individuals? Do I want to really, for example, I'm trying to think of the best example. Do I want, should I say, I'm trying to even think of what would be a bad one, because there are so many good ways to go through these influencers, but it's the idea of who are they speaking to is kind of another thing, you know. And one thing I'm super fascinated by is that there are women content creators in the welding world. I think that's super, super gangster. And that's a really creative way that individuals can utilize some really underserved attention and to be able to go about it in a very unorthodox way, which is truly what influencer manufacturing is. It's just unorthodox. And so being able to embrace that, knowing you have the content already figured out, you then just have to know who's talking to who it is that you're trying to get in front of. And you can do that through various methods. A lot of times I love searching YouTube for specific hashtags, as well as other forms such as like Instagram, if you will, or even LinkedIn. I really can't speak enough to how powerful hashtags are in not only getting your message into specific channels and nooks and crannies of the interwebs, if you will, but also helping you find the best and brightest in those specific spaces by searching for those directly.
Yeah, because you're going to see the same people come up over and over again, and you're going to start to see whether they're actually getting traction on their content or not, or whether they're getting regular engagement, or they just happen to have one post that went viral. That, you know, most influencers, they're going to be using the same hashtags over and over and over again because they found the ones that really work to get them attention and get people coming back to them. So it kind of gives you a good way to find people. Yeah. And something you talked about that's interesting is, you can go after people that have a huge following, but especially in the manufacturing world, that's not always going to be the people who you're going to have the most bang for your buck. And so especially if you're small to mid-sized manufacturer, to go after the biggest influencer who's going to be charging you for every piece of content they create, and they're going to demand a lot more of you the bigger they are and the more well-known they are. There could be a lot of demand from them and from their side. Whereas there's other influencers that maybe don't have as big of a following, but they have a very loyal following that would be happy just to get product from you, or happy to just get your machines or whatever the case may be that you offer. So I don't know if you have anything kind of to add to that.
Yeah. And then one thing I was stumbling on earlier, and I was trying to make sure that I said in an appropriate manner, is like everybody thinks of influencers as I need to find some hot chick who wears entirely too much makeup or some muscly dude who wears no shirts ever, you know, and in all reality, like those can get likes per se, but likes means nothing other than I pressed my thumb on the screen. That doesn't mean I spent any type of time there. And so there absolutely is such thing as the wrong influencer. And at the end of the day, I like to flip the influencer term and change it and mold it into content creator. And I've said it a lot because that's really what they are. We can only hope that they influence specific decisions. But in such a content heavy world, not even now, just moving forward, if you look at the landscape of where content is going, having that raw, real, I'm predicting here that people are going to respond and are responding way more. Take TikTok, for example, to people who are raw, real, authentic, as opposed to those super attractive men and women who are filtering the heck out of their images and making a duck face and making some silly cat, whatever. It's just like, we can see through that. And that's why TikTok is so great. And that's why manufacturing influencing, like influencers and content creators, is such a diamond in the rough, because there are a lot of raw, real, authentic human beings who people want to get in touch with and who are being paid attention to. And people are just afraid because they think, oh, I'm not going to give my money to some super overly attractive individual to make posts. You're so wrong.
Yeah. Okay. So that kind of leads us into, what are some pitfalls that you should look out for when you're getting started in influencer marketing for manufacturers?
Don't chase clout. It's so easy. Because the first thing that you do is, like, for Instagram, for example, I got to find someone who has the most followers. They have to have the most followers. And like, that's cool. Like, that matters because followers definitely equates to reach. And we understand that, like reach and frequency, if you will. But at the end of the day, I'm checking out content frequency. That's a big thing for me. Like, I'm going to see how often they making content. You have to really be aware of that because some influencers will have multiple shows. I've seen like content creators get too busy. And you see like, oh, they've got this show, they're trying to do this, this. And it can be too much. And so they're talking to too many people at one time. So I'm looking at individuals for a consistent message and then also focusing more on engagement. Because I don't care how good you are at creating high quality content and videos and how you can use filters and vignettes and all that other stuff. If people aren't genuinely reacting to your message and they're not connecting with you on that human level, how am I supposed to expect them to, when they're considering my brand versus my competitor's brand, how can I expect them to have their interaction with you influence, for lack of a better term, their decision to work with me because they saw that we were tied together? That's really what it is. Nobody wants to talk about that. But how can I get your network to look at me as much as possible and buy because you and I are associated with one another? People don't want to talk about that, but that's the dirty truth of it.
Yeah. I mean, a brand is the way that the market perceives your company and a level of trust that you have in the market, either positive or negative. So, you know, your brand, you don't necessarily control it. It's something that lives a life of its own. And when you have people who are influential that are using your company products, it's going to build trust with the people that follow them. And the more that somebody trusts your brand and has affinity for what you do, the more likely they are to purchase from you when they're ready to buy. And so with the influencer marketing, you're reaching people at every stage of the buying process and just building that trust with them, which is really, really helpful. So when it comes to influencers, I think one thing that can be really challenging and scary about trying to get started is, how do you find out an agreement that would work between you and the influencer? So, you know, how do you guys approach coming up with terms of agreement that work for you and the influencers that you guys work with?
You know, I'm really glad you bring that up because so many people fall under the assumption that it's just posts and videos. That's all that it is. That if you're connecting via post and video, like that's all the inventory that influencers have. But realistically, there's so much more that influencers can do, especially like they have a website, a specific video mention. You're talking about a link in the bio, hashtag utilization. There's just so many things, quantity of videos. And so with me being able to also agent and be a broker, if you will, for a specific influencers, like kind of as a side, but also internal synergy gig, you can't treat everyone the same. same, because even though you have like a specific influencer, you'd be silly to operate under the assumption that every single entity is going to use that influencer the exact same way and are going to be able to extract value in the exact same ways. Company A would probably love to do a YouTube specific campaign, while company B is trying to really beef up their socials in regards to their Instagram and their LinkedIn. And so you could utilize that as well as, in adverse to potentially doing it for TikTok. And so you have to not only segment where that influencer's strong suits are, but you have to help really identify what your goals are. And you're seeing that a lot. I know a lot of individuals get behind the weeds with influencers, but there is really an inventory, just like on a website. You can have that top banner, you can have the side banner, you can have just an article. The same thing can be said with these content creators, because it's so much more than just individual posts. So if you're able to take their content schedule and make that, I guess, very much synergize with what it is that you're trying to accomplish. There's even short-term runs that can be done, whether it's a single post collaboration, or if you want to happen to have a continuous, 6, 12 month. I've had some individuals want to go from 2 to 5 years worth of collaboration efforts. So a lot of it comes back to level of ambition and also identifying which inventory is the most valuable to your specific marketing goals.
Yeah, and I know you guys have a wide range of machines and tools at different price points. So do you normally work with influencers where you're giving them, in your particular case, equipment and tools, or do you pay influencers to work with you as well?
It's primarily equipment. In all reality, and that's kind of the big thing. There are some opportunities for influencers in the manufacturing space to receive equipment as well as some type of content production sponsorship. Like that happens, and again, it really depends on the company's level of ambition and the influencer themselves, because you're not going to get the same type of conversation with somebody who has, 5,000 followers as opposed to somebody who has 500 plus thousand, you know what I'm saying? So those are two different things, but still somewhat of a similar conversation depending on your general perspective. But that's the main idea, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, and you guys have got some pretty impressive machines and tools too. So it's not like you're sending them a $30 widget and hoping that because in the manufacturing space, it's pretty broad. Some companies have really expensive machines, and some of them have, fasteners and different components that aren't that expensive. So it probably also depends on the level of and the price point of what you're offering them as far as what they'd be willing to do. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, let's go ahead and round it out with what are some practical steps that manufacturers can take that are looking to launch into, they listen to this and they're going, man, that sounds pretty cool. What are some practical steps that people can take to launch an influencer marketing campaign? One,
it is very cool. And whoever has already arrived at the first step by recognizing that it is cool and that it is a really undervalued opportunity right now. It truly, truly is. So if we're considering, I would just say, just go on your social and scroll. I would say first step is paying more attention, because if you've never heard of influencers before, you've only briefly, heard of them, and you don't know even where to start looking, starting on your socials, who's creating cool stuff that you like to see. Now, I hate for companies to get there in the I mindset and they think this is because I think this way, therefore that's the way that it is. I see so much egocentric wish fulfillment in influencer marketing. They think, okay, use this word and everybody will love it because that's the word that we use. So really identifying that message as well. And an easy kind of first step is, I said hashtags before. I would really recommend that. So for example, I'm going to use a little bit of a biased or very relevant term for myself. Let's say machining, for example. What we did, and what I did specifically, is going into my social platform, being Instagram, just for example, typed in hashtag machining, because I knew that I wanted to talk to individuals who were looking at machining content. I know they're looking at it. I can now find out exactly how much people are looking at it, how often it's used, and then also who are some of the biggest players in that game. So it's almost like cheating. So instead of just waiting for you to finally stumble upon the most popular piece of content, you can actually go specifically and say, hey, who are the leaders of each conversation that I'm trying to be a part of? So you're essentially using hashtags to find the rooms of conversation. And then when you find one of the brightest lights in that room or one of the loudest voices, you find yourself a conversation starter.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, thanks so much, Eddie. Really appreciate it. This is a really interesting conversation, and I think it'll be relevant to people. Although, I think there'll be different levels of people's willingness to dive in, but there's definitely a ton of opportunity. Because I'm in this space all the time, and you're one of the few people I've heard talk about influencer marketing and working with influencers in manufacturing. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity for the companies that are willing to take the leap and give it a try. And I definitely think it's worth looking into for sure.
Truly. It's a good thing, man. Turn over all the stones, because there's some really cool conversations happening underneath them, I promise.